There is a spear in Vienna that has ended empires, not metaphorically, not as a symbol of military defeat or political collapse, literally. Every ruler who has held it, claimed it, or lost it has met a fate so precisely catastrophic that historians who do not believe in curses have stopped trying to explain the pattern away. They simply note it, document it, and move on quickly, the way you move on from something that does not fit inside the frameworks you have built your career around. The spear sits behind glass in a climate-controlled museum case. Tourists photograph it daily. Museum staff catalogue it as a medieval artifact, a lance head, iron and wire, and an ancient bound nail. It measures exactly 50.8 centimeters. It weighs what a spear weighs. Nothing about its physical appearance explains what it has done to every single person who has ever possessed it. 1400 years, dozens of rulers, one pattern. Nobody loses the spear and survives what comes next. The earliest credible documented appearance of the spear in the historical record places it in the hands of someone already powerful, someone who would become more powerful still. The pattern starts immediately and does not stop. What we know is this: the spear existed before the written record fully captures it. It moved through the ancient world in the hands of rulers and commanders whose names fill the history books. And every single time it changed hands, every single time someone gained it or lost it, the political and military landscape of the known world shifted in direct and immediate correspondence. This is not the claim of mystics or occultists. This is the documented historical record. Scholars who have traced Spear's passage through history are archaeologists, military historians, and political historians. They did not set out to find a pattern. They found one anyway, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The first ruler in the fully documented chain is Constantine, the Roman emperor who unified the collapsing Roman Empire, who made decisions that redirected the entire trajectory of Western civilization, who won 30 major military campaigns without a single decisive defeat. Constantine carried the spear. This is documented in multiple contemporary accounts. He regarded it not as a ceremonial object but as a tactical one, something to be present at the moment of battle, something whose possession was inseparable from the outcome of conflict. 30 battles, 30 victories, the spear present at every one. When Constantine died, the spear passed through a succession of rulers, and here the pattern established itself with a clarity that should not be possible across centuries of chaotic political history. Each ruler who held the spear rose, each ruler who lost the spear fell. The correspondence is not occasional, it is not approximate. It is consistent in a way that statistical analysis, when researchers have applied it, returns results that fall outside normal probability distributions by margins that are very difficult to explain. The researchers publish their findings carefully. They describe the correlation. They decline to name what is generating it. Alaric the Visigoth held the spear when he accomplished something that had not happened in 800 years, the sacking of Rome itself. The eternal city, the city that had never fallen. Alaric held the spear, and Rome fell before him like every other obstacle. He lost the spear crossing a river shortly afterward. He was dead within the year. The kingdom he had built died with him, fragmenting so completely that within a generation it had ceased to exist as a political entity. Theodoric the Great held the spear and constructed the most stable and prosperous kingdom in post-Roman Europe. His reign is still studied as a model of early medieval governance. When the spear passed from his possession, his kingdom began its disintegration. Within a generation of his death, everything he had built had fractured along lines that corresponded precisely to the moment the spear left his dynasty's control. Justinian held the spear and reconquered territory that the Eastern Empire had lost for decades. His reign represents the last moment at which a reunified Roman Empire seemed genuinely possible. When the spear passed from him, the reconquest unraveled. Territory after territory reverted. The dream of reunification died. The spear moves through the historical record like a key. Put it in a ruler's hands and the lock opens. Take it away and the door slams shut. Charlemagne, 800 AD. The man who united Europe under a single crown for the first time since the fall of Rome. The first Holy Roman Emperor. Still called, across 12 centuries, the father of Europe. Charlemagne was inseparable from the spear. He carried it personally into every military campaign. He slept with it beside him. Historical accounts describe him as treating its physical proximity as a non-negotiable condition of his own safety and success. 47 major military campaigns, every single one a victory, the spear present at each one. At the Battle of Pyrmont in 814, something happened that had never happened before. Charlemagne dropped the spear. In the accounts that record it, the moment is described with the kind of specific detail that suggests the witnesses understood its significance even as it occurred. The spear fell from the emperor's hands onto the battlefield ground. He stumbled. He reached for it and could not immediately recover it. In the confusion of battle, the spear was separated from him. Within hours, Charlemagne was ill. Within days, he was dying. He was 65 years old and had shown no signs of illness or physical decline before the battle. The man who had never lost a campaign carrying the spear was dead within days of losing contact with it. His empire, which had seemed permanent, the most powerful and organized political entity in Europe, fragmented almost immediately. Within a single generation, the unified Europe he had built was divided into states that correspond roughly to the France, Germany, and Italy of the modern world. The drop, the death, and the fragmentation are all in the same historical record, written by scholars who did not connect them. The connection does not require the scholars. It is there in the dates. Frederick Barbarossa, Holy Roman Emperor, the most powerful ruler in 12th century Europe, the man who made 3 separate emperors kneel before him. Barbarossa held the spear and conquered northern Italy, reorganized the Holy Roman Empire, and commanded military forces that no European power could match. He held the spear for decades and remained invincible. In 1190, crossing a river in Armenia during a military campaign, Barbarossa dropped the spear. He fell from his horse into the water. The river was shallow. The crossing was considered routine. The most experienced military commander in Europe drowned in shallow water, in an accident that his contemporaries found inexplicable and his chroniclers recorded with visible confusion. The spear was recovered from the riverbank. The man was not recovered at all. His army, the most formidable military force of the century, collapsed without him, dispersed, disintegrated, turned back. One of the most powerful military campaigns in medieval history ended in a shallow river the moment the spear left its holder's hand. Napoleon Bonaparte knew about the spear. He wanted it. In 1805, before the Battle of Austerlitz, the battle that historians still call his greatest tactical masterpiece, Napoleon sent agents to capture the spear from the Hofburg treasury in Vienna. They failed. The spear was moved before his agents arrived. Napoleon fought Austerlitz without it and won anyway, his greatest single victory. The battle that made him the undisputed master of Europe, and then his decline began, almost immediately. The campaigns that followed Austerlitz grew increasingly costly, increasingly desperate, increasingly wrong. The military genius that had seemed absolute and permanent began to fracture. Russia, the peninsula, Waterloo, the exile, the death on a remote island far from everything he had built. Napoleon never got the spear. Napoleon never won another battle that mattered the way Austerlitz mattered. He ended his life on a rock in the South Atlantic, dedicating his memoirs to people who could not fully understand what he was remembering. Whether the spear caused his decline is a question. Whether the timing of his failure corresponds to his failure to capture the spear is not a question. It is in the record, 1909 Vienna, the Hofburg Museum. A 20-year-old failed art student named Adolf Hitler visited the imperial treasury and stood before the spear display case. He was poor. He had been rejected by the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. He was living in a men's hostel. He had no money, no prospects, no political identity, no organizational affiliation of any kind. He stood before the spear for a long time, considerably longer than other visitors. What he thought, what he felt, what happened in those minutes before the glass case in the Hofburg Museum. He described to associates decades later in terms that his biographers have recorded and struggled with. He said he understood something. He said the spear showed him something. He said he knew, standing there, what he was going to do. In 1938, when Nazi Germany annexed Austria, Hitler's first act upon entering Vienna was not political. It was not military. It was not ceremonial. His first act was to go to the Hofburg Museum and claim the spear, personally. He had it transported under SS guard to Nuremberg, to a specially constructed vault in the Church of St. Catherine. The most heavily protected object in Nazi Germany was not a weapons blueprint, not a state secret, not a military technology. It was a medieval spear. For 6 years, Hitler held the spear. For 6 years, against strategic logic, against military probability, against the calculations of every opposing general, he conquered Poland, France, Denmark, the Low Countries, Africa, Yugoslavia, Greece, country after country. The spear in the vault in Nuremberg, and the armies moving across the map of Europe in correspondence. April 30th, 1945, American forces under General George Patton capture Nuremberg. At 2:10 in the afternoon, soldiers break into the vault beneath St. Catherine's Church and remove the spear. It passes from Hitler's possession at 2:10 p.m. At 3:30 p.m., 80 minutes later, Adolf Hitler is dead. In the entire 1400-year documented history of the Spear of Destiny, across every ruler who has held it and lost it, the interval between losing the spear and dying has never been this short. Not Charlemagne, not Barbarossa, not Alaric, 80 minutes, the shortest gap in the entire recorded sequence. Patton stood before the spear in the Nuremberg vault and said nothing for a long time. He arranged for its immediate return to Austria, faster than any other recovered cultural object, faster than the administrative process should have allowed. It was back in the Hofburg Museum within months. Patton was dead by December of that year. A car accident in Germany, unusual circumstances. He had touched the spear. He had handled it briefly. He was dead within months of contact. Museum conservation staff who have handled it over the decades have their own accounts, mostly unpublished, mostly shared informally, mostly describing a quality of unease that they find difficult to rationalize and impossible to forget. The spear is in Vienna today, in the Hofburg Museum's imperial treasury, behind glass, in a climate-controlled case. You can visit it on any day the museum is open. You can stand where Hitler stood in 1909. You can look at the same iron and wire he looked at. The metallurgical analysis conducted in 2003 dated the spear to approximately the 7th century AD, a medieval weapon, old but not ancient. The science is clear about the metal. The science has nothing to say about Constantine, Charlemagne, Barbarossa, Napoleon, Hitler, Patton, and the 80 minutes. The science dates objects. It does not date patterns. Whatever is in that case in Vienna has moved through 1400 years of documented history, leaving a trail of fallen empires, drowned emperors, and dead conquerors. It has been touched by the most powerful men in Western history, and outlasted every single one of them. It sits behind glass and tourists photograph it and move on, and the museum closes at 5, and the staff go home, and the spear remains in the dark in its case doing whatever it is that objects with this kind of history do when no one is watching. Most visitors feel nothing. Some visitors stand longer than they intended. Some find it difficult to look away. Some, in the informal accounts of museum staff across decades, have to be gently reminded that the museum is closing. They are not always sure, afterward, what held them there. The spear does not explain itself. It does not need to. The record speaks. The 80 minutes speak. 1400 years of fallen rulers speak. You just have to be willing to listen to what they are saying. As always, see you in the past.